So, Connell O'Donovan interviewing Peter Christie on May 29th, 2019. Peter, what is your full Muggle name?
Muggle name? Oh, that's a good way to put it. Peter Roland Christie.
How do you spell Roland?
Roland.
And Christie?
Christie, like Agatha, Julie, Brinkley.
Are you related? I asked you
I
that.
wish.
Yeah, okay, that's right. That was your response to
I wish.
Your mother's full name?
Judith Suzanne Laska Christie.
Laska, like Alaska without the A.
Right, it's Slovak.
Okay. And your father's full name?
You're going to love this. Cornelius Wells Jr. Cornelius Wells Christie Jr.
I love that.
And I have a brother who's the third.
Sweet. And what is your birth date?
April 23rd, 1961.
You're just a few months older than I am. I was born in September.
Ah,
And your birthplace?
Brooklyn, New York.
Brooklyn. Wow.
Mount Sinai Hospital. Yeah.
How many siblings do you have?
I have an older brother and 5 younger sisters.
Oh my gosh. All right. And have you been married?
Yes.
To whom and when?
Charles Black. We did a civil ceremony 01, 02, 03 at, it was a commitment ceremony at St. Paul's on 10th East, or 9th East and 3rd South.
Okay.
January 2nd, 2003. And then we got married officially in New York, April 25th, 2012.
Okay.
So we have paper.
Okay.
And we're not together anymore, but we're still married.
Okay. You've never married a woman?
No.
Okay. No. Any children?
No, but we together helped raise his nephew.
Oh.
From the age of 7. He still lives with Charles now.
Okay.
So he's now 20.
Would he mind you sharing his name, or if it's that private?
Matt Smith.
Okay. What high school did you go to?
G. Ray Bodley in Fulton, New York. G. Ray Bodley High School. G as an initial, Ray, R-A-Y, and then Bodley, B-O-D-L-E-Y, in Fulton, New York, which is about 35, 40 miles north of Syracuse.
Okay.
If you put a pin in the state
Uh-huh.
of New York, that's where Syracuse, and you can spin it. That's where Syracuse, and you head straight up north towards Oswego and the Lake Ontario. That's
Okay.
where we are.
Where did you go to college?
I didn't.
Okay.
Never did.
No degrees or anything?
I went to, after high school, I went to Hartford Ballet had a teacher training program.
That was going to be my next question.
And they, and so I was enrolled.
Hartford or Harvard?
Hartford.
Connecticut?
In Hartford, Connecticut,
Okay.
yes. They had a teacher training program, and I'll tell a little bit about that in the story because it's kind of interesting. They had a teacher training program, a 2-year accredited, so you could get like basic educational opportunity grants, things like educational opportunity grants, and things like that, that would pay for your education, and they would give you a teaching certificate at the end, but not college. But my goal was to get a job in a dance company.
And teach dance?
Well,
or
down the
dance.
road I did, but that wasn't,
okay.
at the time I didn't really, that was not my initial intention.
Okay.
It was more to catch up in the things I didn't have in my earlier dance training.
All right.
So, but I'll talk about that in my
All right.
interview.
Have you had any other formal dance training? Juilliard or
No, just
New York School of Performing Arts?
I wish I could take credit for that.
Fame, I
No.
wanna live forever.
Yeah, no.
No.
Hartford was really instrumental in getting me to the level of getting a professional job.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
That's it.
Oh, that's easy.
Yep. We are done. Welcome, everybody. I am Connell O'Donovan. We have with us tonight Peter Christie. I am not going to introduce him. Sister Moss will take care of that. But welcome to the May Oratory of the Utah Queer Historical Society. And we are not doing one in June because there's too much stuff going on in June. But we'll return here the last Wednesday of July at 6:30 for another one. We're talking about having Pepper Present from the royal court come and talk. And so without further ado, take it away, Becky. Oh, cookies. It's
Donations?
free, but we do accept donations.
I love this part about Connell and I have figured out that if the lesbians introduce the gay men and the gay men introduce the lesbians, we actually get more accurate information up here. Because we're willing to admit that we don't know that much about the opposite sex. Isn't that truly our stuff? My experience with this amazing human being is, number one, nobody gives a better hug than Peter Christie.
I do.
Downtown, right? Oh, I love that. So I love it running into you all the time. I heard rumors about that one of the principal dancers at Ballet West was gay. And of course, I snuck in, because this mean old dyke wasn't going to admit that she loved the ballet. But I would watch in, and so I got to see him. Then I did a little radio program in Salt Lake. Did about a little over 1,000 shows. And very few of them stick completely in my mind, but the best one ever in my whole heart. We wanted to do a really good Father's Day program. We had heard that Peter Christie's father had something amazing to say. So I knew I was going to get to meet Peter. I met his father. Peter became second place because that show was out of this world. His father had written a poem about how much he loved his son. I give you my Peter Christie.
Well, that is a great little introduction. And my dad and my mom were both really amazing people. Short kind of growing up history. I come from a large family. I grew up primarily in upstate New York, in a small town north of Syracuse called Fulton. I was born in Brooklyn, but my early years of growing up, we kind of bounced around through New England and the Midwest, over to Illinois and then back over again. But at the age of, when I was in first grade, my parents decided to buy a farm. And they bought a 40-acre farm in upstate New York and wanted to raise us to learn how to be self-sufficient. If anything happened in the world, we could take care of ourselves, which I hated. Growing up on a farm with cows and pigs and chickens and an acre-sized garden, and now I miss it very much. But it was a lot of work, and hey, Tina Marie.
I'll just sit in front to make an entrance, of course.
And so I have an older brother and 5 younger sisters. So it's a large family. And when we moved up to the farm, my parents, again, their goal was to teach us how to be self-sufficient. And they named the farm the Ark. And the goal was to have 2 of everything. So we had sheep and pigs and cows, and we had a lot of chickens, ducks, and so it was rather an idyllic place to grow up, because out the backyard there was this huge pasture that then opened up into a magnificent forest that we could just kind of wander and play and be creative. There was a winding path of rocks that had kind of a mini stream that my dad backed up and created a pond, and my sisters and I would call that the Yellow Brick Road, and we would play on it all the time. And so
Were you Dorothy?
No, I was always the scarecrow. So but we had a lot of fun growing up, and my 40th high school reunion is coming up this year, the beginning of August, so it's going to be interesting to go back. I do go back to that area of the country a lot to visit my sisters who still live there, and it'll be interesting to see all of those people that I grew up through Facebook. We've really connected a lot with them, and I'm anticipating it's going to be a really large reunion. And I have to say that growing up, I think that probably a few people might have suspected that I was gay, but I never was a target of any kind of bullying that way or anything. I grew up very involved in the student government and the band and the drama, and I started dancing when I was 9. My sister wanted to take ballet lessons, and when we went, she was a year younger than me, my sister Carolyn, and the teacher only came into town from Syracuse a couple times a week to have her school there. And so my sister wanted to take, and the teacher didn't take anybody younger than 9 at the time. And so I happened to be in the car with them when they took her in to sign up, and the teacher said, well, if he takes, I'll let her take into school, and we'll give you your lessons for free. So my mom said, he'll take. So, and it was completely on the other side of town, and I stuck through all the way through high school with her, but it was, looking back, not the best training. Not the best training. It was, once or twice a week for an hour, and what can you do with that? And so by the time that I was in high school and really kind of ready to be a little bit more serious, or checking out whether I wanted to be that serious, I really wasn't where I needed to be technically as a dancer to really be where I should have been. I had done well in school. I was 5th in my class, graduating of about 350, 400. So decent size. But you know how you take those SATs and ACTs and you can send the scores out? And so I sent my scores to a bunch of different schools to see how I would fare compared to other people that were interested. And one of the schools that I sent them to was here at the University of Utah. They have a really good ballet department. And so I thought maybe that's a place that I'd be interested. But my scores were high and I was from out of state. So they sent me a letter of acceptance because my scores were high enough and I was out of state. And because dance was my major, I got offered some scholarship money too. So that's where I was going to go to school. But also in the spring, I graduated in 1979.
Great year to graduate.
It was a good year. It was a good year. What was our class motto? Booze, pot, sex, and wine. We're the class of 79. Our teachers loved that. So I was going to come to the university and be enrolled in the ballet department, but also that spring before, I had gone into New York City, and I auditioned for the School of American Ballet, which is the prime school that's affiliated with New York City Ballet. And there were 3 other people in the audition, 2 women and 1 other man. And at the end of the audition, the Russian woman who runs the school pulled me into her office and said, and I wish I could do a Russian accent because it would be very funny then. She said, "You should quit because you'll never get a job as a dancer."
Oh, snap.
And one of the things I've done, I danced for Ballet West for many years, and now I run all their education programs. But having run a school now, I can totally see where she was coming from. If someone of my technical ability had come into our school, it's a challenge at 17, 18 years old to be that far behind to actually have a career. I vowed after that I would never say that to anybody, because I did have a career. I was very fortunate. The directors of the Syracuse Ballet Company and School, Tony and Sirpa Salatino. Sirpa was a little Finnish woman about this tall. And they said, maybe don't go to Utah. They were leaving Syracuse, and Tony had gotten a job with Hartford Ballet in Hartford, Connecticut, and she was going to go and teach in the school. And they had this really amazing teacher training program where you would learn how to be a professional ballet teacher and share your art form and do that. And part of the process of learning how to do it was actually immersing you in the class. So the first months of class, you're at the bar standing next to little 8-year-olds doing slow tendus and, learning really, really basic technique. And over a 2-year program, it kind of goes through all the levels of what you need to know to teach those levels. But at 18, it was oh, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. So it's kind of an accelerated crash course of ballet technique. And I had a natural facility, but oftentimes with men, picking up dance later is almost easier. As young boys in arts education dance, particularly, there's chemical connections in the brain that just don't really register until you're a little bit older. So for me, it
But
was.
they do for girls?
Yeah.
More.
I think
That's really
for females,
interesting.
you see it connect a little bit earlier, and so now though, I mean, it happens. You can do it. It's just ballet is very repetitive. It's not very exciting. It can be very boring, and that's also a big challenge for a lot of boys. But it's also a challenge for a lot of girls too. So, as we come along, we look at how we learn. There are differences, but there's a lot of similarities too. But for me, it worked, and so I accelerated very fast through the program, and within a year, I was offered an apprenticeship with the company. They had a chamber company, so Hartford Ballet, and I was making $50 a week. And so I also had several jobs outside of that. I worked in a pizza parlor on Friday and Saturday night from 9 o'clock to 4 in the morning, and a pharmacy from like 3 in the afternoon or 2 in the afternoon to about 4, so then I could take my afternoon classes. So I was like really juggling.
Wow.
Dirt poor, literally the starving artist. My parents didn't have a lot of money, so I was totally supporting myself on my own. And I would do little things like on Friday nights and Saturday nights, we'd have my friends call it and order a super large pizza, and nobody showed up to pick it up. And so there's this pizza sitting there at the end of the night. And I think the owner kind of knew what was going on, and he was very generous, but that pizza would last us all week. We'd have salads that would be made that didn't get picked up, and that would so we came up with these creative ways to kind of get by. But I was very creative at, tuna fish, cottage cheese, and ramen. You can do amazing things with spices and stuff. So those 3 years in Hartford, 79 to about 82, were really developmental in allowing me to have a dance career. They really did give me the stuff that I needed to be able to go out in the world. And in 1982, in the spring, the company went on, the older members of the company, it was a small company in Hartford Ballet. I then got a contract with the company the following year. So that year, the older company went on tour, and the younger dancers were left behind. And it was very cheap to take the train into New York. And we had some friends that lived in New York. We would go into New York on the weekends. And at that point in time, a lot of companies had their national audition tours. They would go to New York and hold auditions to look for new dancers. And when you audition for a ballet company, you basically take a ballet class, and from that ballet class, they kind of whittle through and figure out who they want to offer a contract to at the end of the audition. Class is about an hour and a half. And so we would go and take these classes because they were amazing directors of ballet companies and teachers from around the world, and you didn't have to pay for the class. They were free. So that was also really great because we didn't have a lot of money, and you would get this amazing class, and usually we got cut, towards the end of the class, but we would usually get, a pretty decent class through most of it. And one of the auditions I went to was for Ballet West. Bruce Marks was the director at the time, and we would go to these auditions, and then as we got cut, when everybody was out, we'd go get Haagen-Dazs or something. And so I was in this audition, and there was maybe close to 300 people in the audition. So you're in this big dance studio, and it was literally like walk across the floor. Thank you for coming. Please stay. They whittled down to about 150 maybe, and then we're all standing at ballet bars about 6 inches from each other, and we'd start class, and we would do all the exercises, and they would go around, tap your shoulders, and slowly they whittled down. until there was about, maybe 16 of us at the end of class. And we finished the class, and Bruce Marks, who was the director, then called us each into a room, and he offered me a job. And I was so naive. Well, I'm not really looking for a job. I just wanted to take your class. He said afterwards, I couldn't believe how stupid I was. At the time, I was probably making about $125 a week. And our contracts was about a 26-week contract, which means the rest of the time we didn't get paid. And Ballet West had a 42-week contract they were offering, and probably quadruple the amount easily. It was a much larger salary. So he said, well, I'm going to make the offer. You go think about it and then let me know by this date. And when I told my friends, they were like, are you stupid? Yes. So even though I didn't come to the University of Utah in '79 to start school, 3 years later I wound up out here anyway. So it was kind of destiny, I think, to be here in Utah for me. It was really in the cards. So I packed up my little Pontiac T1000. It was kind of little like a Chevette with everything that I owned, and drove across country. And coming over the mountains, had been this horrendous hailstorm. This is early June. Imagine that. Right? And I tell people that. I said, you couldn't have had. I said, yeah, it happens. And you come through, into the valley, and the sun had broken out. It was just like, it was literally like, this is the place kind of thing. And I had a friend who had been in the school in Hartford, Carol Cedar, who was in the modern dance department at the university. And when I accepted the position, I called her up and said, guess what? I'm coming to Utah. And we were great friends in Connecticut. We used to go to the beach and hang out. She would lay there nude and all this. I was like, I don't need to see this. But she was really fun, great personality, very dynamic. Kind of looks a little like Jennifer Beals. So you can imagine, gorgeous. And about this tall also. Something about short women. So she said, well, that's great. My roommate's moving out. I have an extra bedroom. You could just move in with me. So I didn't even have to look for a place to live. She was out of town during the summer, so she had left the key with another friend, and I drove in, got off on 7th East and drove up South Temple and turned up to 7th East to South Temple, and she was living right there on the corner of Virginia Street and South Temple, right across from Reservoir Park. And I lived there for 4 years with her. It was a great time. She was very free-spirited, and while I was in Connecticut, I really didn't do much as a gay man. I was very entrenched in the ballet world.
Were you out, though, or?
Not really.
Okay.
I would do a few things. Like when you would walk, there was a certain, I misbehaved a little bit, but as far as they all knew, I was, again, sometimes it's just obvious, but I just didn't really act on it. But when I came out here, I didn't really have anybody that knew me one way or another way, and so it was really easy to just be open, and Carol was totally fine with that, and so I kind of really blossomed. I knew Stan those days. I really blossomed, didn't I? We had a great group of friends that, in those days, it was Doug Wortham. Maybe some of you know Doug. We used to hang out. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was, yeah. So we had great times, and it was the days of the Old Sun, where the what's the new place called? Vivint's Margarina Delta Center. Right there, that was such a great, with the East Room, it's such a great time to be playing and having fun.
Yes.
Oh, nothing like it. And so as a dancer in the company, young, what was really great about it for me is it was really an instant family at Ballet West. The sense of camaraderie that you get in a ballet company with people that you work so intimately daily. and you get to know so well, and then some really great friendships in the community as well. It was a great time to be young. 21 is when I first moved out here, and so those early years in the 80s were really great. I really had a wonderful time, and my interactions with the gay community really was just going out clubbing and being rather promiscuous. I certainly enjoyed my time. And being a young dancer, people enjoyed me. So,
where would you cruise? Is that okay for me to ask, or is that too?
Well,
or was it just bars?
At that time, pretty much bars, and then I discovered like Memory Grove and Sugar House Park and 3rd and Main and those places. Kids just don't know how it is these days. The fun and excitement of that kind of the thrill. But I did had a couple boyfriends, through the years as a dancer. That kind of extended relationships, but nothing really that serious until a little bit later on in my life. In the early 90s, I wound up having a friend that asked me to perform in a number at Coronation.
And what is Coronation?
Coronation is part of the Royal Court of the Golden Spike Empire. It's an organization, community organization that is a social organization, but now raises a lot of funds for different needs. There's a cancer fund, AIDS fund, a people with AIDS Christmas fund, a scholarship fund, and a whole wide variety of things that they raise money for and disperse to organizations, individuals.
And what do they do at Coronation?
Well, the primary way for fundraising for this group is through drag shows. And as an organization each year, when it was first created in the mid-70s, there was an emperor and an empress. And so there was a male line and a female line, the drag line. And it's now, they just crowned the 44th emperor and empress this last weekend at the Salt Palace. Grand event, everybody in full regalia, crowns and gowns, and as many rhinestones as you'll ever see. And there's now also 70 chapters in different cities throughout the country. It has blossomed. It initially was created by the founder of the system was Jose Sarria, a little Hispanic drag queen in San Francisco that used to perform at another little one,
At the Black Cat.
At the Black Cat, yeah. And
I know Jose quite well, actually.
Yeah, great individual. And the whole court system is this really interconnected, again, a family of people. So I wound up first getting involved by being a backup dancer for a drag queen in one of their numbers at a Coronation for Betty John and Gary Broadhead, 14. So that's how long ago. Wow, that's 30 years. Oh my gosh, that's kind of freaky. So,
Can I interject, Peter,
yes.
really quickly? Do you know how the emperor-empress thing came about? Do you know that story?
Here in Salt Lake? Or?
No, for the whole court system.
Yes. So
Jose's identity.
right. So Jose Sarria was a very outgoing personality, very large personality. Had been in the military. Actually ran for a public office in San Francisco. Did not get elected, but was the first gay person that ran for an office. And there's a character in San Francisco, Joshua Norton, who declared himself in the late 1800s, declared himself Emperor of San Francisco. And there's a grave in Colma with his headstone. And Jose knew of this and declared herself the widow of Emperor Norton. And so she was Empress Jose. And had some friends, and then they kind of evolved into electing the next empress, and so now it's over 50 years in San Francisco. So one of the oldest courts. Portland's court actually predates. They had some contests in Portland for the Rose Queen, and at a certain point in time, they just celebrated 60 empresses.
Wow.
Yes, and so they started naming empresses after San Francisco did, and they took all the Rose Queens and gave them empress numbers. So they're the pre-empress. So it's a big thorn for a lot of people as to who's actually the first court. I'm not going to go there. But they're both amazing organizations and have done a lot of wonderful things over the years. So that kind of spread then throughout the United States in different chapters. We started here with Pepper and Deanna in 1976. Our mother court was Denver, Colorado, and Scotty Carlisle came and crowned our first emperor and empress in 1976. They had predated us. So the system has been around for quite some time. I got to be friends with a number of the members of the court at the time. Ran for a couple of pageant titles. I was a Mr. Gay Utah at some point, and a King of Hearts. Interesting story there. So King of Hearts. So pageants, you do dress up, you do question and answer, you do talent and things like that. Now the drag queens all lip sync, but the guys, some of them lip sync, some of them do other things, and so I would dance for my performance, and sometimes they were provocative, shall I say?
Dance or costume or both?
Yes. There are laws in the States, so you can't go too far, but I had that dancer body, so. And so I was, when I ran for King Queen of Hearts, I ran with Yvette. Each of the bars or organizations could sponsor somebody, and then you'd be elected by whoever showed up that night and submit a ballot. Well, that night of the contest, we were doing Sleeping Beauty, and the way the pageant was set up for that particular one is you would perform, everybody would vote, and then past and court members would perform while they tally all the votes, and then they would announce the winner at the end of the night. And you would campaign prior. You'd put up posters, and the Sun, which was great, had this wall that as you came around the bar, there was this wall that they would post posters, and we got the whole wall because we were sponsored by the Sun, and that whole wall, like imagine the size of the door, was a picture of me and Yvette in a toga, and me in nothing with a bow and arrow, and I was nothing. And so it was like that big. It was huge. It was life size. So you came around, and there was Peter in all his glory from behind.
You're sitting on your phone.
I know.
Oh, okay.
I put it there. When it buzzes, it's great.
You're matching it.
Charging you better.
It's all that electricity. Thank you. So, the night of the pageant, we had this performance, and there's no way that I couldn't do my job. So they said, well, when you get here, you can perform, but people will vote without you having a chance to perform or whatever. So that night, I showed up right as they were finishing tallying, so I got to do a number. I did some George Michael thing. Then they announced that I won. So Steve and I both won. So
it was the photo.
I think that might have had a little bit to do. But I also was pretty active in the community. A lot of people know who I was. So, and then a year after that, then I was Mr. Gay Utah, and then Empress 16, Stephanie Thomas.
What number were you?
I was, 18 and 20.
Oh, okay.
So,
thank you.
Up until that point at 16, the kind of ranking is you have the Emperor and Empress that are elected, and then the Prince and Princess Royale, who are kind of second in line. If something were to happen, they would step up and take over the responsibilities. Were nominated by the Emperor and Empress, and then the board and College of Monarchs would vote on them and approve them. Stephanie decided that the Prince and Princess needed to be an elected position as well. And so the first year that was in effect was for 18. So a friend of mine, Ralph Currington, known as Shanika, and I both decided we were going to run. So we ran for the positions of Prince and Princess Royale. And we ran unopposed. Nobody else was running. And Walter and Marshall Bruner, Walter, who's an entertainer, was the Empress that was elected that year, and Marshall was the Emperor that was elected. And I think that they also ran unopposed as well. I don't think anybody ran against them. So it was kind of an easy campaign. And we were elected, and it was a great year. Marshall was the manager of the Sun, which was really wonderful because that's where most of our shows were held, and so he would take care of all the business side of everything and getting everything set up, sound and lights and sets and things like that. And it was a great performance space. And Walter was an amazing entertainer. Still does a great carol chanting, and sings live, very deep bass voice. And Shanika is also a very dynamic performer as well. So we reigned for 18, and it was a very fun year where we got along very well, and we raised a lot of money, and it was great. We had such a great time that Shanika and I both decided we couldn't run for the following year while you were reigning. You had to wait. So we decided to take 20 and run for 20. And a lot of people knew that was kind of going to, and again, we ran unopposed, which was also very helpful on the bank account because I work in the arts, I don't have lots of money. So that was helpful. Our Prince and Princess was Jeff Kozeski, and Veronica was our princess. And so I think overall it was a very successful year. Our coronation step down, where then the new 21 was elected, the Salt Palace had just been redone, and we had access to the grand ballroom. So we rented the grand ballroom, and we had close to 800 people in attendance at coronation, which was really quite large. It was so much fun. We had an elevated stage 4 feet up in the air and a 25-foot ramp. Our theme for our coronation was a royal wedding and an imperial honeymoon. So Shanika, as a drag queen, took my last name. She's now known as Shanika Christie. She had done that early on in the year. And so she had a 25-foot train on her wedding dress. And I had a white and gold leather military uniform made with a cape and all that. And it was quite grand. 12-foot pillars with huge flower sprays at the top, and a stained glass window with our logo. And our logo, the name of our reign was.
That's so gay.
It's so gay. So we were the court. Ralph was black, is black, and so the name of our court was the Court of Many Colors, the Bold and the Beautiful. We didn't suffer from lack of attitude. And she was the only serene black diamond African empress, and when I was prince, I was the diamond stud prince. I had a diamond in my ear at the time, and so I was the diamond stud. I love little pun things like that. And so when we ran for 20, I got another piercing, and my mom gave me another earring, and so I had 2 diamond studs. So I was the double diamond stud 20. And our logo, which was so cool, was 2 X's, the Roman numeral X, made from golden spikes with diamonds set in them. So that was my campaign logo when I ran, was for 20, was the double diamond stud emperor. And then when we actually we changed the logo so 1 diamond was black and 1 diamond was white, which is kind of cool. We had a really kind of fabulous year. At the same time, so when I ran for emperor, that was May of 1995. In February of 1995, I was out of town doing some school shows in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I had a sore throat, had gotten a little ill, and one of the other dancers had strep throat. So I got a prescription for penicillin, took some penicillin, and had a major allergic reaction to it. In Albuquerque, in the middle of a measles outbreak, and I'm like in hives, and I'm in the schools, and they're like, what are you doing? So I went to the hospital, they gave me some prednisone and Benadryl and helped clear it up. But as an allergic reaction to penicillin, I got thrush. Little diflucan cleared it up. It's one of those things that happens with allergic reactions, but it's also one of those things that happen, early indicators of HIV. Well, it cleared up, but then it came back. And with a thrush, it's very yeasty, and you're not hungry, you don't eat. And I started losing a lot of weight really fast. And by May, and I was still dancing, performing, I got some lesions here and another one on my cheek and a couple other spots, and I got a huge one on my heel. It was probably about that big around, and one on the back of my tongue that would hit my uvula. So it really, I didn't want to eat. And as a gay man, raising funds for HIV, and you kind of put two and two together, but you're kind of in total denial.
Local river Egypt.
Yes. And I'm campaigning out, and no one said anything. My mom, who was a nurse, didn't say anything. My friends, no one said anything, because they all thought I knew better and was dealing with it, which I wasn't. I was in total denial. So if you look at pictures of my campaign, I was really, really thin, skeletal, almost scary. By June, when I finally went in to get diagnosed, I was down to about 120 pounds. Yeah. And lesions and yeah. So finally I had a friend, so campaigned all the way through May, got elected, did all the hoo-ha and ran and got crowned emperor.
What year was this?
1995.
Okay.
So I had a really good friend. I was teaching some classes down in Provo. On Monday nights, I would teach at Utah National Dance Academy on Monday nights. And so I'd drive down, and then afterwards I had a group of friends that lived down there, and we would do our own family home evening on Monday nights. We would make food and play games and stuff, and then I'd drive home. And Lisa Sage was cutting my hair. And so right after coronation, I was down at her house in the first week of June, and she was cutting my hair, and she kept leaving the room. She had her salon at home, and she kept leaving the room, and she'd come back in and cut for a little while, and leave again, come back in. And finally, she just said, "I can't do this anymore." And she burst into tears, and she goes, "Your hair is dead in my hands, and you're not there anymore. There's no sparkle in your eye. You're wasting away. What the hell is going on?" And I had a boyfriend, and we had split up. I said, "Oh, it's this, and this." And she goes, "No, this is not that. This is something else. You're dying." So that was kind of like my wake-up call. Finally, somebody had said something, and so I went the next day. I called Clinic 1A and I said, "I need to come in."
Where was that located?
Clinic 1A at the University Hospital. So we had given them money. And so, I mean, I was very familiar with Kristen Reese and Maggie Snyder, and so I knew that's the place to go. I called and they said, we can't see you until you have a diagnosis. So they said, you need to go down to the public health department and get tested and come back with the results. So I went down that day, and after the fact I talked to some of these people. I mean, I was so out of it. I think that there was a bit of dementia already kicking in at the time. Usually it would take several weeks for results to come in, and they rushed it, because walking in they were like, yeah, this guy's not going to last. So I came in probably within 2 or 3 days, and they said, you know what the results are, don't you? And I said, yeah. And they said, well, yeah, it's really bad. So they called up to the center, and I went up that afternoon and met with Kristen and Maggie. And at that time, my T cells were 60.
Wow.
So I was literally on the edge there. Started on AZT right away. Here, take this. And at that time, that was primarily the major medication that was out. Within several months, my numbers really started to go up very quickly. Had great impact. I started putting on weight. I still had the lesions. And a new drug called Epivir came out that was kind of experimental, had been approved. And they said, do we want you to try this new drug along with AZT? Did that, and the lesions just started to disappear, and the one on my heel literally fell off in my hand.
Ooh.
Wonderful, yeah, exactly. So I took it into them. I said, you're not going to believe, and they were stunned, because they had never seen this before. Usually if you had KS, that was it. Capsular sarcoma, that would take you out. And so
That's a cancer. Right?
Yeah. So they were stunned that this worked so well and so fast. Come to find out later, they were really worried because the one in the back of my tongue, they were worried that it was going to close off my esophagus and I wouldn't be able to breathe, or my trachea. So I got really lucky. The timing was just right. And so through the year, I improved a lot, put on weight. We always had summers off as dancers, so the timing was good as well, because we were off and I wasn't dancing at the time, so it gave me a little time to kind of recover. And the May and June was when things really spiraled kind of out of control. But I remember a performance in April. We were doing Carmina Burana, John Butler's Carmina Burana, and a piece by Ray Mason called Seasons. And incredibly hard ballets physically. And I had cough drops on the light booms in every wing so that I was like living off of fruit juices, because that's the only thing I could get in, because everything else, the yeast didn't want to eat anything. I was instantly full. So to have these cough drops, and I think again some dementia was creeping in at the time. I remember being on the stage for the section of Winter, looking across the stage at Maggie in the wing, and we had this entrance where we'd come in and do this big lift and all this, and I literally was standing there saying, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do. I had no clue. And Maggie at the time said, she looked across the wing and said, I don't know what I'm going to get. And luckily, because we had rehearsed so much, you go into the muscle memory, and it just kind of happened, and things happened, and I just kind of got through it. But it was a brutal season. I looked at videotapes of that, and I was so skinny at the time. I could get my leg up really high. I was really thin. I was great. And again, it's like people don't see things. Like people at work didn't say anything. After the fact, once I'd gotten diagnosed in that summer when I did start working, I knew that this was the situation. I had to go and talk to John Hart was the director at the time, and I had to go to talk to him and say, I have full-blown AIDS. It's not just HIV, it's full-blown. And I don't know what that's going to be. And John Hart, commander of the British Empire, very British, very proper, very unemotional. Wept. And he said to me, I've lost a lot of friends over the years because of this. And he said to me, whatever we can do, you have our support. So we just kind of worked through it. And luckily, because my health did improve, and I didn't have any other opportunistic infections, I didn't miss a day of work because of it. Now, side effects from the drugs, a lot of the medications, when you take them, react with your system, and you suddenly need to, excuse me, I need to visit the restroom. And so that I would just and I could leave a rehearsal instantly without causing a scene, and I would go and take care of things and come back in. And so they were very accommodating that way, but the early medications, Norvir and some other ones early on, were incredibly harsh. And because your system is so beat down, the side effects are very strong. You have a lot, and as your system gets stronger, the side effects are less and less, and it doesn't affect you as much. But in those early days, it really could be quite dramatic. I knew where every restroom was in any place I was going. I would scope out where everything was. But I was able to dance, and so I had talked to John about it, because you're dancing with other dancers, and in those days there still was a lot of stigma, and people could say, so we had to make the other dancers aware of the situation. And it amazed me at how many people were surprised when they found out. I'm like, how could you, I'm like this big, I had these lesions, and are you not paying attention to what's happening in the world?
Were you the first dancer in the company to have?
And only. Now, there were a couple dancers that had been dancers in the company who had retired and moved away, who passed away. David Jackson and Randy Ray both passed away, but after they had left. So I was the only one that had been visible. So as time went on, my health improved, and it kind of became a non-issue. You take your medications every day reliably, and my numbers would kind of increase over the years. And I didn't get sick. I was not somebody that got flu and colds very often, and so I was really fortunate that way. And still, so now I take medications at night before I go to bed. 8 pills.
But
Some
they've
of them
changed over time, haven't they, as they've gotten better drugs?
Yes, yeah. So there were some, like the Norvir was bruised. They were brutal. They were these horse pills like this, and you'd have to take like 6 at a time, and they had to be kept cold. And we were traveling, so I'd have to travel with a cooler to keep them cold. Or if I didn't, there was a liquid form of it that tasted like kerosene. Peppermint flavored kerosene.
Oh my God,
It was awful, but you did what you had to do. You just took them.
How did your mother take to this? She was a nurse.
Yeah. We talked about it before she died. She regretted that she didn't say something to me sooner. But because I was so active in the court and fundraising, and a vocal proponent of go get tested, play safe. My slogan was play safe, have fun, love life. I would sign all my letters or whatever with that. But I didn't get tested. I did play safe at the time. Once I knew that it was out there, condoms were a standard practice in my sexual experiences. But because of my proclivity to misbehave when I was younger, and the fact that I didn't smoke, I didn't do drugs, I didn't drink, led a very healthy lifestyle, I was very active. the belief was that I had probably been exposed very early on. And living a healthy lifestyle kind of let me go for a very long time before the shit really hit the fan.
Did you find your energy level changed, as this progressed? I mean,
Not
now,
until-
that's very demanding physically.
Not until the crisis hit. When I lost all the weight, it got more and more challenging to get through. Yes, but because it was kind of this microcosm of from February with the allergic reaction to losing weight very, very fast through the spring to diagnosis in June, and then medication, by August I was back up to regular weight.
Wow.
So it was this really pendulum swing back to healthy again.
Really rapid.
Yeah. So, and then at that point it was really the side effects from the medications that were the biggest challenge.
Did you find that the other dancers, once you explained it, that you had the issue, that were they reluctant to perform with you? Did you have any of that?
Never.
Really? Male or female?
Never. Not to me. I never had a dancer say I won't dance with him. Staff worked with me just as it was as if there was nothing there. Some of the medications would make my skin very, very dry and flaky, and I'd have several dancers would say, "Try this lotion, try this, this will help." Some very good friends. So no. Again, huge kudos to the company.
Really? Because you know how the community at large was, they didn't know if you could shake hands or touch or
Yeah.
be in the same room.
Now this was in the 90s, so we had kind of
that-
progressed past the 80s days where it really was hard. You know, we knew more about it. So it was, and David and Randy had both left the company and had passed away. So a lot of the dancers I was still working with knew them. And what had happened to them. So no, I've really been lucky. I've been born under a lucky star. So fast forward to the years of, court years. I stayed very involved with the court for many years. I had started a scholarship fund for the court as I stepped down as emperor, which is really cool. That's now given out every year, probably over the last 20 plus years. So I stepped down in 1996. So it's been around for a long time. We've probably given out maybe $75,000 in scholarships, which is really cool. I was with Chris Andreessen for a while. He was a prince in 25, reign 25. But he did not like living in Utah and wound up moving to San Diego. We still stay in touch a little bit. But in 2001, I met Charles Black. He's the choir music director at St. Paul's, and he also owns the massage center, which is a great place to get a massage. We hit it off, and I was working as a choreographer for the 2002 Winter Olympics as part of the team to put the opening and closing ceremonies together. And I had met him the year before. We were kind of over the summer kind of courting, and it was interesting because I was kind of a slut for many years, and I wouldn't have sex with him. I made him wait. So we would sleep together, but I would because I knew he was dating other people and I really wanted him to pick me. So I kind of well, that's not true. We had played around once months before, but then when we were really dating, I was like, you're going to have to wait for it. So
You dingled your carrot.
yeah. But I had moved after Chris had left. I got an apartment. I lived in those great apartments by the Greek church with the pillars, Wayne Court, and the La France apartments. And it was a great apartment when I lived there in the 1989. I lived there from 89 to 95 when I moved out. 2-bedroom apartment, balcony, $270 a month. It was like, and I was 3 blocks from work, and I had a garage. It was a great place to live. And I wound up moving back there in the early 2000s after Chris and I split up. And I probably spent maybe 4 nights there. And I had the apartment for maybe 4 or 5 months. Because most of my nights were at Charles's place. And one night in November, we were spending most of the time up in the stadium getting ready with for the Olympics. And I came home and half my stuff was in the house. He has a house near St. Paul's. And I was like, I guess I'm moving in. And then he moved the rest of the stuff, so I didn't have to move everything. So that was in the fall of 2001. We did a commitment ceremony at St. Paul's in 2003, 300 people, like a wedding. Church decked out. 01/02/03 was our anniversary date. So it was magnificent. He's music director. He had a 13-piece orchestra. He orchestrated everything. It was stunning. It was beautiful.
So gay.
It was so gay. And the Olympic chapter was really cool. So I danced for a long time. I joined the company in 1982. I danced until, boy, I'm jumping around here. Oh, look, a squirrel. In 1997, we hired a new director for the company. So I had my diagnosis. I was healthy. I was dancing again. Jonas Koge was the new director. I was on vacation in Pensacola. My sister, her husband's family had a condo on the beach. And I went down there and spent a week on the beach in Pensacola, which is great. But right before Memorial Day. And I get a phone call from our new director, Jonas Koge. John Hart, the wonderful man that he was, had retired. And they hired this new director. He's from Sweden. And he called me and he said, I have this idea for an outreach program that works with kids in the schools. And everybody says you'd be great, because I'm just a giant kid anyway. And I always would be drawn to the kids that were in the casts and stuff, and was very supportive of them. So everybody says you'd be great for this program. I wanted to start a program based on a program by Jacques D'Amboise, who was a dancer with New York City Ballet for many years. National Dance Institute, where they go into public schools and work with kids and teach them dance. Would you be willing this summer of '97, to go to New York for 6 weeks? We'll put you up in an apartment, and you'll apprentice with their summer program, and then start a program here in Salt Lake with 2 elementary schools, Benyon Elementary and Whittier Elementary. With this dance program, Jacques will come out with another woman named Lori Klinger, and we'll start the program, and then you'll teach all year long, and we'll do this big performance at the end of the year with all the kids. I was like, sure, a summer in New York, paid. We work from like 8 in the morning till 3, and then I had the rest of the day off to see shows and shop and do whatever. It was great. It was right in Midtown, right near the Winter Garden Theater where Cats was playing. It was heaven. So I worked with these kids, and then we came back and we started this program. In the spring of 1996, I had a knee injury. We were doing this ballet by Val Canaproli called Lamborena, African Bach combined, really cool music, great choreography. And there was this movement that we kept doing where we do this step where we kick our leg in. It kept snapping the bottom of my femur, and the cartilage apparently was really dry. Sorry, I'm bouncing around. And shattered the cartilage on the bottom of my femur. So I had these pieces of cartilage floating around inside my left knee. Had to stop in the middle of that season. Medical technology, the amazing thing that it is, they just kind of went in arthroscopically, sucked the small pieces of cartilage out, shaved it down, took out the cartilage. But now it didn't have any cartilage on the bottom of my femur, which you normally have, because it's kind of a pad. So they drilled up, and this is kind of great, they drilled up into the bone, and the bone marrow came down and created a new cushion. So I had to be off of my knee for about 6 weeks while it solidified. Great, wonderful, physical therapy. But now my knee's a little cranky at the age of 35, 36. It had been a little swollen, so it's hard to do some things. And so I'm on the edge. I'm about 35, 36, on the edge of my dancing career, but I could probably dance for a few more years. So I did this program. That year, and John had retired. His ex-wife was the director of education at the time, and she decided in March she didn't want to do it anymore. So Jonas said to me, we would have yearly contract talks. You're being renewed or you're not. So this had been going on for many years of getting my contract renewed. And said, I have an idea. Can you just kind of wait a little bit? I think some things might happen. I have a different thought. So when she retired, he called me into his office, called me out of rehearsal and said, so Mary's left. This position's open. It's a artistic staff position, it's full-time position. So there's like this many jobs of dancers in the United States, and there's this many jobs in administration. So they don't come along very often. He said, you could probably dance for a few more years if you wanted to, but this job is open now, and if you take it, it's a full-time job, and you'd have to just do this one. I was like, I'm in. Because dancing was hard. I wasn't known for being technically proficient. I was a capable dancer. I was always in the first cast of things. I like to say I was always the prince, I was never the prince. I was always the one the girl didn't want. So I was always in the front, character parts, not a lot of I was not dead tired at the end of the night because that guy doesn't do a whole lot. Like Paris and Karenin and Anna Karenina, Hilarion and Giselle. So I was like, yeah. So that kind of became my next career in education outreach for Ballet West. And I had also been teaching in the academy a lot, so it kind of flushed out. So it was interesting because in that 95, 96, 97 time frame, like growing up and through high school and then years, I always thought, I'd be a dancer. And I never knew what I was going to do afterwards. I didn't go to college, didn't have a degree, and I kind of just saw my life to that point and not. It just isn't there. And it's kind of like when I was diagnosed, like that life kind of ended, and then this new one started. And it was interesting because also at that time, like that whole time, everything was all about me. And hey, world, look at me, look how great I am, I can do this and this and this. And then it became about teaching and educating that first group of kids that we worked with at Benyon in 1997, 98. We had a group that would work with us on Saturdays after school. We called them our celebration team. And I said, if you stick with me, we at that time knew the Olympics were coming. I said, we'll see if we can get you as part of the Olympics. And so that was one of the things that I had them, when they had a call out for volunteers, I called them and said, hey, I've got this big group of 80 kids that are involved in our public education program that I'd like to have you take a look at, that if you're looking for kids for the ceremonies, they'd be great. So they came and watched us on a Saturday working with all the kids at Rose Park Elementary School and said, absolutely, this is the date we want you to audition. But would you come work with us? Because they saw me working this huge number of people, which is really what you needed for the ceremonies. So I wound up coming on staff and ran all the auditions through the summer into the fall. Our audition date for the kids was September 19th, 2001, which was 8 days after September 11th. So we were going to have the entire group, we had probably about 120 kids that were going to audition. And a lot of the parents said, no, we didn't want them to be on that national stage with who knows what was going to happen. So we had about 80 kids that actually auditioned. And I had to sit on the side watching the kids audition while they did. And I think of my dancing career That's probably the highlight. Was watching these kids from all different economic backgrounds, diversity, that I had said, if you stick with me, I'll get you a chance. So they were not dancers. They were school kids who had some dance experience, who got to be put on this opportunity to stand along with all the other really professional dancers of the state. And 41 kids.
When you started telling them that, did you know you were going to be involved?
Oh no, it was going to be
You
that.
just gonna-
Yeah. So it was kind of lucky for me to kind of be on the window of watching this happen, which I normally wouldn't have. They would have gone in on their own. So it was kind of neat to just sit there and just watch it go, knowing all the other groups that we had auditioned. It was really quite remarkable. And then working with them in the stands, and we had some really challenging cases. And I had a couple of the mothers of academy students that volunteered to work as volunteers for the Olympics that were serving as chaperones when we were in the stadium. One woman in particular, Lisa Hollerbach, was one of them. And there was one kid, his name was Coleman Stonehawker. Came from a family that was incredibly non-supportive. He would show up with ninja throwing stars and pot at school, and so half the time we didn't know whether he was going to be in classes or not. Suffered from a lot of mental challenges. So I kind of put Lisa on watching him, but he made it all the way through all the rehearsals and performed in the ceremonies and stuff. Unfortunately, I did see an article in City Weekly where they interviewed him when he's in the prison.
Oh.
So, yeah. But those times were good for him, and it was like one of those things where, I wound up running into him years later, and he said that was one of the best times in his life. So it's interesting. We've had some kids that went through the program. One boy, Christopher Del Porto, again in that first year, went on to study with children's dance at Virginia Tanner, and actually danced with Palabolas, which is national dance, modern dance company that tours the nation. He's back in Utah now. So it's really interesting because we've stayed in touch with a lot of those kids over the years. And I wound up directing the academy from 2004 until 2011. That's a whole other chapter. We went from 70 kids at that time to 700. Now there's another director for the academy because it got so large. Now there's about 1,000 kids in the school. 2 satellites, one in Park City, one in Lehigh, and downtown. So the growth was really great. So it's been a very different side of my life now, teaching and sharing the art of dance through the community. Still being involved in the court to some degree, but not a lot. I served on the International Court Council for a while. Under Jose, I was one of her heir apparents. She created a council, and she had a whole hierarchy of 1 through 20, 25. I was number 7, 7th in line of succession. And then when she passed away, Nicole the Great became Queen Mother, and she created her own council. But it became very expensive to travel that much. Now I serve on her Privy Council as an advisor. It's national. So it's interesting because you have all these different elements of life, very gay, very not, very, on the vestry at St. Paul's Episcopal Church, which if you told me 20 years ago that I'd be involved in church and all that. But the Episcopal Church I adore. I love that they're so inclusive, and I'll be walking with them in Pride. The whole diocese walks together collectively. I just think that's a religion that kind of puts their money where their mouth is. They really kind of support it. So I have to say my life is very good. I'm very blessed. I'm very happy. I'm not with Charles anymore, but we're still good friends. I always think that's important, that you be able to stay friends with people that you were friends with. But there's somebody up there watching out for me.
And you're teaching these kids, besides the elements of dance and all that, What's the life lesson that you want them to learn? What's your message behind the dance?
The name of our program is called I Can Do. I love that you said that, which is inspiring children about not dropping out. It's an acronym. And I think it comes from being told you're not going to be able to do this. You're not going to have a job as a professional dancer. And having other people step in. If I had gone to the University of Utah as a dancer, I probably would not be a dancer. Because the people that took me with them to Hartford really rode my butt and got me where I needed to be. Because I didn't know well enough what I needed to do, but they did. And so part of it is, I like to be on boards. I don't have a lot of money, but I know a lot of people, and I know a lot of. I drink and I know things. What's that line from Game of Thrones? I don't drink, but I know things, and I know people, and I can connect people, and I can be an influencer that way. And so part of that I try to impart to kids is this is who you need to talk to, this is where you need to go, and this is what you need to do. If you want this to happen, this will make it easier. I won't tell a kid that they can't do it. I will tell them that it's going to be a real challenge. You have these obstacles in your way that are going to try to take you down, and it's up to you whether you let them take them down or not. So that's the big thing, I think, is if you want something, it may be achievable, but you're going to have to really work for it. So you think you can dance American Idol, suddenly you're a star, is not the way that most of us get where we need to be. And so I think part of that really is reaching out to other people for help. People that think that they can do it on their own, they might be able to, but it's going to be a lot easier if you tap into other people that are experts and have the capacity to help you.
I'm curious how the Russian dance teacher responded when she found out you went pro.
Oh, she has no clue who I am. She dances with, she interacts with thousands of dancers over the, I was just a blip. Yeah, so, yeah.
Other questions? Randy, I know you've got a burning question on your mind there.
I do have one.
I knew it.
I'm an educator, and I'm just wondering what opportunities have come up where you've been able to, how do I phrase it, use your sexuality to help other children or to show them your life without waving a pride flag in their face?
I think it's being visible. People at work, dancers. We've had some young dancers that obviously you could tell at 11, 12, they were going to follow that route. And girls too. So being out and proud of it, letting people know that I had a husband and that I was married and that I had a happy life. People that know me tend to look at me as being a very positive person. I would be visible as a member of the court. I was in the paper all the time for dance stuff, but also court things. So I didn't shy away from being out that way. An interesting chapter kind of has recently developed because I'm part of the documentary of Kristen and Maggie, Quiet Heroes. And that was kind of like coming out again because at this point in time, most people who look at me wouldn't know that I have AIDS. And at work, that whole generation of dancers that I worked with are no longer there, except they're on staff. Some of them are in staff positions. But the younger dancers that I interact with all the time were blown away. You what? So this documentary came out and it was like a huge education opportunity. And it's gotten a lot of press, and it's been a very visible documentary. It premiered at at Sundance. Yeah. So, and then they also did a little short, an 8-minute short called Still Here. It's on Radio West if you want to see, and that's really kind of my story. Some dancing clips on there when I was very young.
Oh, wow.
So if you want to see that, that's on there. Through our scholarship fund, I knew, when I created the fund, I made it a stipulation that it wasn't just for like university or college, but that it was for secondary education, something that is for careers. So vocational school, and we've had several young dancers from the Ballet West Academy access it. One who just got a job at Fort Worth Ballet, and we actually have a trans student that accessed the fund as well, female to male. You would never know looking at him that he was, and I'll keep that kind of anonymous for him. But it was neat because I could say, we have this resource that you can access to help that. We have a couple of other young students that we have another one that's male to female who's a second grader.
Wow.
Yeah, so cool. It's just kind of being visible and knowing that I am open to somebody. Now, it is kind of a fine line because of sexuality. It's not a public school situation, but even still, you got to be respectful and make sure that parents are involved in any conversations, and that there's multiple people in the room when you're having conversations, so that doesn't veer off in a direction that you're going to get in trouble, or they will. So.
Any other
The
questions?
question I was going to ask about, with your current, where you're at now, coming out in this documentary and so on, have you noticed any negative interaction with some of the parents who didn't know, or some of the people who did? Was any?
Great question. When I was first approached by Jenny McKenzie, who's the producer of the film, actually Kristen and Maggie approached me and said, we're approaching some of our patients who would be willing to speak on camera. It has the potential to be very visible. We'd like your story and whatever. And then they probably interviewed maybe 15 patients. I'm not quite sure of the number. And then they kind of narrowed down to the 3 that they actually featured in the documentary. I went into Adam, who was the current director at the time, who he is the director now, and our CEO, and I said, I have this project that I've been asked to be part of, and I just want to know if you're okay with me doing that. And Adam, of course, went right away, absolutely, no problem. But the CEO and our HR person also said, no problem. And I said, no, I really want you to go and look at the ramifications of what this could be, because we may have funders or people or schools or parents that have a problem with that. And they came back and they said, 1, we can't tell you can't do it because it's your life. But we wholeheartedly endorse it. Go for it. They gave us access to the studios. I talked to a couple of the dancers. One of the boy that received the scholarship is one of the boys that's featured in the little clip of me coaching in the studio and 2 of the students. So I talked to the parents and said, this is what this is going to be. If you're okay with that, I'd like to feature these kids in these clips, and they were totally fine with it. So I've, again, had no negative feedback or problems with that after the fact.
Richard?
I think the outreach is so important to maintain a viable, lively arts. You're educating audiences as well as potential dancers. When I go to the jazz concerts, everyone there looks like they're over 80, and I'm just worried that that audience is diminished, but because there isn't enough outreach, and I assume that you feel that's important too with what you're doing.
Yeah. So our outreach for dance is, yes, it's to educate about our art form, but it's also to make it a little accessible. The image of ballet is that it's very elite and that it's kind of old, and so the programs that I was just out at Beacon Heights Elementary with our lecture demonstration this morning. In fact, the principal there was the principal that started at Benyon with our I Can Do program, which is kind of cool, this full circle kind of thing. Is that it is really about just making art more accessible. Amazingly enough, we get great support for arts education in this state. We have a program that works with the Utah State Board of Education called POPS, professional organization presenting in schools, Utah Symphony, Utah Opera, RDT, Rye Woodbury, Valley West. Our budget is close to $5 million that's given to the arts organizations. There's 13, Spy Hop, Utah Film Center. So that supplies a huge funding for what we do in schools. So a lot of people don't realize that we get that support. And because we work as a group, lobbying for money, it becomes kind of a no-brainer. The legislature knows what we're doing and the quality of what we're doing as well. There's great oversight, great peer evaluations of what we do and what our programs are. We get over $600,000 a year from the state for our programs. That allows me to bring our programs to over 100,000 students and teachers a year, which there is not another company in the world that has that extensive outreach.
That's great.
So yeah, we're very fortunate that way.
And all of you, if you want a chance to see the little short film still here, it's on the
Radio
Queer
West.
History
Oh,
Facebook
exactly.
page.
Oh, great.
Oh, did you just put it on there?
Yep.
Okay.
Sweet.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's a cool little film. You'll hear a lot of the stuff that I said today is in there too, because it's my story.
Yeah.
You know, it's one element. But for me, I've never really worn it on my sleeve. I just kind of live my life, and it's kind of interesting that factor has come back up again. And I think it's one of the reasons why they chose my story was because it is a positive side of the story. I was lucky.
Yeah.
So.
I have to tell you my favorite Walt Larrabee story.
Oh, I love it.
What empress was she?
18.
Empress 18. So I met Walt in April of 1980,
Oh,
long time ago, just right after we graduated from high school.
okay.
I was a totally closeted, super drama queen.
And super cute. Yeah.
Oh, stop! Tell me
Keep
more.
going.
And I got on the cast of the Mormon Church's play that played at the Promise Valley Playhouse.
Right.
It was Promise Valley,
Right. Uh-huh.
right? And it was 1980 was the sesquicentennial anniversary of the church. So it was the 150th anniversary, and so we made a big deal about it. We were the sesquicentennial cast of Promise Valley that had played annually for 40 years, 50 years, and Walt was in the cast as well. But I was super closeted. Walt was not at all. How he got in this?
That were like tentacles.
One day after rehearsal, this is my favorite story. One day after rehearsal, State Street used to be packed Friday and Saturday nights.
Cruising up and down. Yeah.
Cruising. Bumper to bumper traffic from the Capitol down to about 45th, sometimes 56 South,
Yeah.
And then you'd drive down, flip a Huey, come back up.
Yeah.
He took me out in his little VW bus, and I just remember, and it was pouring rain, and he's a horrific driver. And we are cruising State Street in his little bus with the little teeny windshield wipers, just not doing anything. And we were listening to Blondie at just ear-splitting levels, and it was just, to me, that'll always be, my special Walter. We were both now radical fairies years later, and so we hang out a lot. I just saw him last week.
He's been a good friend, yeah.
He
He's
is
an amazing performer. Doesn't perform as much now, but
right, but he has the biggest heart. Such an amazing person.
Yeah.
Anyway, Peter, thank you so much for
thanks.
for joining us.
I hope that made some sense. I kind of
It
wandered
did.
around.
A big round of applause, everybody. Thank you very much. Again, as a reminder, there is no oratory for the month of June. We will be back the last Wednesday of July. Help yourself to cookies.
Thanks.
Free
And if anybody else has
donations.
any other questions,
No.
you can find me
Yeah,
easily enough.
yes.
I'm
And
easily found.
you can be out in the...
I'd also like to thank your technical assistant.
Dan Fondridge, thank you. It's usually Rich Kane, but it was his birthday today, and he's in Key West, Florida, celebrating.
That's too bad.
I know. Thank you again.
Thanks, guys.